Hi everyone, Andrew back again, Charlie Black 20 on YouTube, and we are doing another movie review. I promised this one earlier. It is for the reboot slash sequel to Jurassic Park, Jurassic World. Now, getting right into it, we see these two dinosaur eggs that are hatching, and one of them pokes out like these little claws, these three claws, and it moves away part of the shell, so its eye is revealed, and we see that it's a carnivore, obviously. And our first thought is, uh-oh, because we know it's not good news. And we flash over to the mainland of the United States in the family home of Zach and Gray, two boys, brothers, and their mom is sending them to Jurassic World to see their aunt, her sister, who is running Jurassic World. And the two parents are getting a divorce, and the kids they've picked up on this. So obviously her sending them to Jurassic World is so they can be spared whatever's going on, all the drama and such. And so the next scene is, I believe it is Claire, the aunt and runner of Jurassic World, and she is doing a pitch to these investors. I believe Verizon was one of them, and they are talking. She's talking about how dinosaurs 20 years ago, genetic alteration was considered magic next to science. She talks about these investors are wanting, and all these new people who are coming to the park, they want new attractions every year, and they also want more than just dinosaurs. They want a bigger wow factor. And so they've decided to create a new dinosaur, to design a new one. And Henry Wu steps up and explains that they have already done so. They've created a new dinosaur that just didn't exist before. They used genetic gene splicing to create an entirely new dinosaur that has multiple kinds of dinosaurs and multiple kinds of other species to adapt to the climate and such. And they call it the Indominus Rex. Now we go over to Claire gets in the helicopter that is flown by Maserati, Simon Maserati, who is the owner of Jurassic World, and he's 2 days away from his pilot license, and we see that he's using the helicopter and everything, but he's not all there in controlling it yet. He's still pretty wild at the controls. And he starts talking to Claire about how is the park doing, are the guests enjoying themselves, are the animals happy, and Claire keeps rattling off these numbers, and she says there's no way to measure the animals' emotional responses. And Maserati says, yes, you can see it in their eyes. So Maserati, he says that John Hammond left his dying wish to me. He didn't ask us about expense or profit. He said spare no expense. So Maserati comes through as a very rich guy who does a lot of things for, it seems like, his own amusement in this case, which is that he's learning to fly a helicopter. Still cool, but he's also taking John Hammond's wish to heart, and he is focusing on the animals and on the happiness of these people. So he seems like a good guy, while Claire is way more uptight, and he tells her that she needs to go to the beach and relax. And they come to the Indominus Rex paddock, where their new construction is going on. They've built the walls 40 feet high now. Claire mentions that one of the workers almost lost an arm to feeding the Rex, and that they had to improve security. And they see the Indominus Rex through this glass, which actually there's some cracks in the glass. And when Maserati asks how that happened, she says, tried to break the glass. Maserati says, I like her spirit. And when he sees it, he says, it's white. You didn't tell me it was white. And Claire says, you think this will scare the kids? He says, it'll give the parents nightmares. Is that good? It's fantastic. So Maserati has a moment of doubt, and he tells Claire there's this guy on the island who works with the Raptors, and a Navy guy, and he works with the Raptors to learn about them. And I want you to get him and have him examine the paddock for vulnerabilities, because he is very worried at this point that this Indominus Rex might be a little too much, or there might be something we've missed. And so we flash over to Owen Grady, who is played by Chris Pratt, as I said. And he is working with these raptors, 4 raptors. You've got Charlie, Echo, Delta, and the second in command, the Beta, Blue, who has a long blue stripe going down her back. And Owen is using this clicker, and he's using hand signals and giving them rewards of like pieces of rat meat. And they're listening to him, and they're following his directions. And we get a scene where Vince Hoskins, comes up to Grady, and he's basically the one who's his boss. Basically, he's part of InGen, and he says he needs a field test of these animals because they can follow orders, and we need them for the money we can make by putting them on the ground as weapons and point them at the direction of the enemies, because when all the tech goes dark, they're going to need something to fight the enemy. And so having these velociraptors do it when they can follow orders, they're vicious, they've got 75 million years of instincts in them. And Owen is not on board with this. He says these are wild animals, these are predators that if they decide they don't want to listen to you, they won't, and they could kill us. And Hoskins goes off on this kind of a tangent of Simon Maserati. He's so diversified, he doesn't know what he's invested in. He's not just in family parks and telecom and all this stuff. We need these animals. War is a part of nature. It's its pecking order to decide who's at the top and who's not. And Owen Grady finally says, do you even hear yourself talk? So Hoskins seems to lack a lot of self-awareness, and he finally says to Owen, this is going to happen with or without you. And then an alarm sounds from one of the employees saying there's a pig loose, because they were using a pig to get the raptors riled up. And it gets out of its cage, and it's running around the paddock of the velociraptors. This one guy, apparently the newest guy, he's using some kind of a catch pole to reach down into the cage and get it. And he goes flying over the railing and into the paddock. And the raptors are like, lunch. And they're approaching him. Owen Grady opens up the gate and goes in there, and he uses the commands and using the signals telling them to stop. And they are surrounding him like you expect a pack hunter to do. And he's saying each of their names, saying, stay right there, hold there, don't do that. And then the employee gets out, and he tells them, shut the gate. They start shutting it, and then Owen does like a maneuver and rolls under the cage door right before it closes behind them. The raptors try to come after him. Boom, they hit the cage door. And while this is going on, Gray and Zach have arrived at Jurassic World, and they've been going around seeing all these places, but their Aunt Claire isn't with them. She sent one of her assistants, I think her name was Zara, who is supposed to be keeping an eye on them, and she's not really paying attention to them at all. She's on the phone talking about her upcoming wedding and that her husband can't have a bachelor party because his friends are animals. Typical bridezilla thing going on, which I found kind of annoying. But we go back to Claire after Zach gets a phone call from his mother, and he tells her, "Oh, we got VIP passes. We got food, money for food from Aunt Claire." She had seen them earlier, but had gone off to a meeting. And the mom calls her sister, and she's nearly crying and saying, "Why aren't you hanging out with the boys? And you need to go hang out with them." And Claire's just kind of putting it off while she goes down to see Owen, and they have a conversation where she's talking about the Maserati wants you to come look at the raptor fences, not the Indominus Rex paddock, and see if there's vulnerabilities because you work with the raptors and you control them and everything. And he says, no, it's not control. It's a relationship built on mutual respect. and that's why you and I didn't have a second date. And she's like, excuse me, I didn't want a second date. And it's obvious they have a kind of an attraction to each other, even though they are just completely bickering. They're almost like complete opposites. But, and he tells her, I know you have to look at these animals like they're numbers on a spreadsheet because you're in charge of the place. But they're not. They're alive. And so they go to the paddock, and Owen talked about how this animal has been completely has been in isolation. Its only positive component is the crane that feeds it, the crane that lowers food into its cage. And he says, and then they try to find it because it's not. They don't see it inside, and so she starts tapping the glass. She uses a thermal locator that's supposed to find it inside the cage, and it doesn't show up. It's saying no infrared, nothing. There's nothing there. And the security guard says, these gates haven't been open in weeks. And Owen looks out the glass to one side where the doors are, and he says, were those claw marks always there? And we see these long, long white claw marks going up and down the wall. And Claire panics, or rather she gets really scared, gets in her car and drives towards the control center, and she calls them up, and she says, I want you to use the tracker that's in her to find this dinosaur. So Grady, the security guard, and one of the construction workers go over to the gate where the claw marks are, and Grady says she might have escaped. It all depends on what kind of dinosaur they bred in that lab. And we did learn that the base genome, I believe, genetic sequence was a T-Rex, and the rest is classified. So the control room does look up where the Indominus is, and they say, it's in the paddock, it's in the cage. Oh shit, there's people in there. And Claire's like, get them out now, get them out now. And they radio them and say, get out of there. And they try running for the regular door, which is on the other side of the paddock, so they can get out. And the Indominus Rex steps in between them, and the security guard gets scared, runs back to the big metal doors, and uses the keypad to open it. The construction worker gets killed. Owen is running for the door now. Maserati tells them, shut it. He shuts it himself, and Owen gets through it, and the Indominus manages to get there and get his head and his body in between and just force it open. And Grady goes underneath one of the trucks, and the security guard is hiding at the hood of one of them, another construction vehicle. And the Indominus gets out, knocks aside the truck, and then eats the security guard too. So Grady takes out his knife, cuts the gasoline line or something to the car, and pours it all over himself. So when the Indominus comes, it's looking for him. It knows he's under there, or at least it thinks it does, and it smells for him. It can't find him, so it wanders away. And Owen is like, oh. And Claire gets to control room, and she says, okay, nobody panic. I want ACU, which is the asset containment unit, to go after it with non-lethals. At the same time, Zach and Grady, they've ditched their babysitter, and they've gone on all these different places. Like they saw the Mosasaurus, which is a gigantic underwater dinosaur that we see it eating a dead great white shark. And then they go on these gyrospheres to go into the field with the dinosaurs. And we get this Jimmy Fallon video talking about how the gyrosphere will stay upright. It's got glass that will stop a 50 caliber bullet, things like that. And when they get the call Owen gets to the control center, and he talks to Claire saying, that thing made us think it escaped. And she says, we're talking about an animal. And he says, a highly intelligent animal that doesn't know where she fits on the food chain. And when he sees they're going after it with non-lethals, he tells them those people are going to die, get them out of there. Claire yells at him, you're not in control here. And the way they're tracking it is through the implant, the tracking homing device that's embedded in his body. And they find a piece of the Indominus Rex, and in it is the tracker. And Owen says, She knew where you put it, so she cut it out. And we see blood dripping from these leaves hitting the leader of the ACU team. And he says, and we see it come out of the bushes, and it's camouflaged. It camouflaged itself. And they begin to fight it, trying to get it. Like, they get a net over its mouth with one of the net guns. They're shooting it with these electric prongs. They're, I think, like a couple of, I guess, like not beanbag guns, but something a lot stronger. But it's not working. These people are getting killed left and right, and what's left of them run away. They get in the car and get out of there. And Owen's like, you need to kill this thing now. You've got live ammunition. Get the machine gun you got, put it on the chopper, and smoke it. And she's like, I'm not going to turn this place into a war zone. And he says, you already have. That thing is loose. And she says, Mr. Grady, if you're not going to be helpful, you can leave. And he gets really angry. He goes over to Maserati and says, I would have a word with your people in the lab, because that's no dinosaur. And that's exactly what Maserati does. He goes down to the lab, and we see Henry Wu coming out of this door where you need a fingerprint to get in and a password. And he's coming out of there, and he sees Maserati coming to him. And they get into a discussion about what this thing is. And Henry Wu, Maserati asks him, what kind of a reason would we need to have a dinosaur that can camouflage? And Wu explains, well, we use cuttlefish DNA, which can camouflage itself. And Maserati asks him, who authorized you to do this? And Henry Wu says, you did. You said scarier, more teeth, cooler, I believe was what you used in your memo. And if I don't innovate, somebody else will. And Maserati says, you are to cease all activities immediately. And Wu says, you told us to do this. We are doing nothing different than what we did from the very beginning. We have always filled in the gene sequence gaps with other animals, with other DNA. Because if we didn't, these animals would look a hell of a lot different. And you asked for more teeth, not authenticity. And Maserati says, I didn't ask for a monster. And Wu says, monster is a relative term. To a canary, a cat is a monster. We're just used to being a cat. So we flash over to Claire in the control room, where she sees on this camera this little girl reuniting with her mother, it looks like, and she remembers her two nephews. And she tries to get some people, some rangers, to go out and get them from the gyrosphere place, because they look up how many of them are back in to the park, and only one of them is still out there, and she realizes it's her nephews. And so she can't get any rangers to go out there. They're all tied up with evacuating the island as it is. And so she decides to go get them herself. But she needs help, so she goes to get Grady. And Gray and Zach decide that they're going to go through these that there's this fence that the door's open to, and it says restricted area or no access. And they decide to go through it anyway, or at least Zach does. And they find these ankylosauruses, I think they were called. But they're basically, they have these large hammer-like tails, and they've got armor protection on top of them, as well as spikes going out the sides on top of their bodies. And Gray and Zach, Zach says, see, there's 4 dinosaurs right there. And Gray says 5. What, aren't you supposed to be some kind of a math genius? No, 5, look. And they look, they can see in the reflection in front of them of the gyrosphere, they can see the Indominus Rex's teeth, its mouth. And they look around behind them like this, and it roars. It basically kicks the gyrosphere, and it goes after the ankylosauruses. One of them stands its ground and hits it with its tail. It gets turned over and its head bitten. Basically, crunch. And Gray and Zach, because they took the gyrosphere took a couple hits, it's gone upside down. And Zach's phone is at the bottom, is at the bottom of it, where it was the top, so that he can't quite reach it, and it starts vibrating because they're getting a call from their Aunt Claire. And the Indominus tries to break into the gyrosphere, basically puts its claw right through it without any effort, which said it could stop a 50 caliber bullet. That shows how strong this thing is. And it opens its mouth, and it tries to bite through the gyrosphere, and it barely gets its mouth around it. And then you think for a moment it can't get its teeth through. Nope, crunch, and it's holding it and just smashing it down like this. And Zach realizes that they need to get out, and he unbuckles them, and they fall down. It breaks the gyrosphere one more time, and then they make a run for it. And they jump over this water, down this waterfall into the water, and they stay down there. They stay underwater for, I guess, a few more seconds while the Indominus Rex is waiting for them to come up, like. And then it goes away after roaring. And we see we see Owen and Claire find this Bronchiosaurus. It looks like that is got all these claw marks on it, and it's dying. And they have a moment with it, a very emotional moment, while it slowly dies. And Claire is nearly crying. Owen is very stoic at that moment. And they find the gyrosphere, which has been completely destroyed. They find Zach's phone, which has it's broken. And Owen points to their muddy footprints and says, no, they got out. And they head over to the waterfall, and she says they must have jumped, and he says, brave kids. And she starts, and so they go on. And the kids find themselves at the original park, the original visitor center, where we see the wall picture of the raptor. They also find these jeeps, these gas jeeps with Jurassic Park on them, and they mention that they worked on their grandfather's old Jeep, and so they decide that they're going to try and get this thing started again. And we flash over to Maserati, who's still at the control room, and we see Hoskins, who has been alerted to what's going on through the radio and everything, and he comes to Maserati at the control room, and he says, I have the solution to your problem. We can use the raptors to hunt down the Indominus Rex and kill it. And Maserati says, let me be absolutely clear. No velociraptors are going to be let loose on this island as long as I'm in charge. And Hoskins says, you're crazy, man. How many more people does this thing have to kill before you see the need to get rid of this thing? And I'm the answer right here. And Maserati basically says, I'm going to examine this and decide whether it fits in the moral principles of our company. And Maserati gets the helicopter. His instructor isn't around, so he's going to fly. And he gets them to put the machine gun that they own on the chopper with 2 other ACU soldiers. And so they head out. Then the 2 boys, they get the Jeep started, and they head out. And when Owen and Claire hear it, they head over to that same spot, and they realize that they got one of the Jeeps started because one of them's missing, the other one's still there. But then the Indominus shows up, and it knows they're there, and it just can't reach them. And Owen and Claire, it breaks through the roof, it breaks through the wall, and they make a run for it. Then it hears the chopper above it, and it makes a run for it through the forest, through the jungle, and it's heading towards this thing called the aviary, which is a big bird cage that holds the flying dinosaurs. And it breaks through relatively easily as they're shooting at it, and all these flying dinosaurs go out of the hole that it's made and go all over the place, and they kill the 2 soldiers relatively easily, and then Maserati, the helicopter crashes with him in it, killing him. Zach and Grady get to the perimeter of the new park, where they get through the gate, and they see the dinosaurs flying towards the park, and those flying dinosaurs start attacking different guests, and Zach and Grady find Zara, or she finds them, and she's being a bit hysterical, and she does get grabbed by the flying dinosaurs. She gets taken on a ride. She gets dropped into the mosasaur cage. The flying dinosaurs are trying to eat her, and then the mosasaur eats her and one of the flying dinosaurs. We get to Owen and the rest of the ACU team, who grab these tranquilizer guns, and they start relatively easily bringing these animals down to the ground asleep. And one of them is trying to bite Owen. He's trying to bite at his head, and then Claire hits it with the butt of one of the guns and tranks it. And then Owen gets up and gives her a big kiss. And she reunites with Zach and Gray, and they ask him, "Who's this guy?" And she's like, "Oh, we work together." And at that moment, Hoskins brings in his InGen team, which are well-armed private security division of InGen. And he takes control of the control room, and he tells everybody in there, "You're relieved of duty, we're taking over now." And Lowry, who's one of the control operators, and he calls Claire and says, "They're planning to use the Raptors to kill the Indominus." And she's like, "What do you mean, use the Raptors?" And Owen's like, "Son of a bitch." And so they drive over to the raptor cages where Hoskins is getting all the raptors ready, trying to prepare them for this hunt. And Owen gets there, and as Hoskins is starting to talk to him, Owen punches him hard in the face. And Claire tells him, "You wanted this to happen, didn't you?" And Hoskins is like, "Oh, Jesus, come on. How many more people have to die?" And he makes a good point that the next morning they can either have the Raptors succeed in doing this, or they can have it all over the news that they failed and people died because they didn't try everything in their power. And he calls it a mission, even though they've never done this before. It's a field test, basically. And he tells Great Owen again, "This is happening with or without you." And Owen finally does agree to help. He tells them what they're going to do. He comes up with the plan. And he does tell them, "Please don't shoot my raptors." And Claire hides the kids in this truck. And she gets in the front seat, and they can open a window, a sliding window, to talk to her in the front seat, while the InGen personnel head out on the hunt. They smell the Indominus Rex through... They get the scent from the piece of flesh it left behind when it took out its tracker. And they head out. And they go on the hunt. And the raptors are wearing these cameras around their heads. And they're all armed to the teeth. And they finally find the Indominus Rex, but the raptors don't surround it and start to fight it. They start talking with it, like caw, 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 things like that. And Owen says, "I think I realize why the lab didn't tell us what it's made of. It's part raptor." And the Hoskins can see everything on the cameras, and he orders them to start firing. And they do start shooting the Indominus Rex. They get in a few hits, especially with the bazooka that they're using. And the Raptors have changed sides. They've gone over to the Indominus Rex. And they start killing the InGen team one by one. And Owen has a moment where he could reconnect with one of them. I think it was Charlie. But Charlie gets blown to pieces by another bazooka round. So that's one Raptor down. And they head back to the Owen heads back to the visitor center that way. One of the InGen personnel, security guys, gets back to Claire in the truck, he's all bloody. He tells them, "Make a run for it, get out of here, drive away." And he's trying to get in the back of the car with the kids, and the Raptors get him. And then two of the Raptors are chasing the truck, so Echo and Delta. And they're trying to catch them, and Zach and Gray do what they can. They throw a tank at them, totally misses, an oxygen tank. Claire manages to use the truck to force one of them into a tree, knocking it out for a minute. And the other one, it gets on the edge of the truck bed, and then Zach and Gray manage to get one of the stun guns up, and they stun it, and it falls off. And they tell Claire, "We can't wait to tell Mom." And she's like, "No, never tell your mom about this, ever." And Grady catches up with them on his motorcycle, and they make it to the visitor center, and they also find the lab. And they see that Henry Wu and all the others have gone away. They're packing up all the dinosaur embryos. We see that Henry Wu had a phone call with Hoskins that they have all these little side projects going on, and they don't want a bunch of lawyers poking their nose into it. So they're doing some at least unethical, if not flat out illegal stuff, a very illegal gray area, I'm sure. And Wu gets on a helicopter and is taken away along with most of his equipment and the necessary equipment and the embryos. While Hoskins stays at the lab, and we see that Claire, Owen, the two kids, they see what's going on in the lab, and they're like, what's this? What's going on? Hoskins says, it's above your pay grade. Can you imagine a dinosaur a fraction the size of this Indominus Rex, and saving all the lives, going into tunnels, fighting for the military? And then one of the other raptors shows up and scares Hoskins and all the others, and he's like, no, I'm on your side, I'm on your side, see? I'm a good guy. And then, of course, it bites his hand, kills him. I found that an unnecessary thing. Like, come on, Hoskins wasn't in... Oh, I apologize. There was one more thing. Before the field test, he'd had a conversation with Owen's teammate, Barry, about how he had once had a wolf pup, and he had an unbreakable bond with him, and that his wife came after him with a steak knife one night, and the wolf took a chunk out of her arm for him. And Barry said, you put him down? Hell no. We had an unbreakable bond after that. Which I think it showed more human than most villains seem to have. Like, I think Hoskins, I'll talk about him later. My apologies. I'll finish the movie first. But he gets killed by one of the raptors. Owen, the kids, and Claire run out of the visitor center. Gray uses the holograph machine to bring up a Dilophosaurus image to slow down the raptor, and it does slow it down for about a minute. But then Blue, the other raptor, jumps in front of them as they exit the doors. The other raptor comes out the door, and then another one from the other side, so all three of them are there now, the three that are left, and they've surrounded them. And Owen's like, that's how it is, huh? And he has this moment where he manages to reconnect his position as Alpha, as caretaker, and he takes off the camera that's still on Blue while the other two have lost theirs. And he reconnects with them, and the Indominus shows up at that moment and is basically communicating with the raptors to kill them. And Blue refuses. Blue roars, growls at the Indominus Rex, which knocks Blue aside. Owen whistles, and the other two raptors go after the Indominus while he starts shooting at it. And Gray, Zach, and Claire they hide in this souvenir shop. And Gray starts counting again, like he's been doing this whole time. He's been counting constantly about different things. And he says, we need more. Need more what? We need more teeth. And Claire gets an idea. She gets up, grabs a flare and a radio, and runs. And at that moment, both of the other raptors are killed by the Indominus. Grady has gotten in a few more shots. They've done some damage to the Indominus, but it's still standing. It's still fighting hard and killing hard. And Owen is out of ammo. He gets in with the kids in the souvenir shop, and they try to hide. They try to take cover away from the Indominus, and it's still clawing at them, trying to get at them. And Claire gets on the radio to Lowry, who has stayed behind at the visitors' control center. He's the only one left. And she tells him to open paddock 9. And he's like, are you serious? And she's like, Lowry, be a man and do something for once in your life. And he's like, why do you got to make it personal? And he opens the paddock, and we see, as Claire lights a flare, it's the T-Rex. And we have to remember, this is the original T-Rex, the one that broke out of the pens in the first movie. And she leads it using the flare back to the Indominus Rex, throws the flare at the Indominus Rex, and the T-Rex gets there and roars at the Indominus. It roars back, and it gets into a large fight with each other. And at first, the T-Rex seems to have the advantage, especially with its jaws, and its head being like a harder than diamond, I think is the words. But eventually, because of its claws, it starts gouging out this T-Rex's skin, and the T-Rex is about to get its head snapped get its neck snapped, and this familiar sound, the caw, 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 that the raptors make happens again, and Blue comes out of nowhere, runs at the Indominus, jumps on it, and starts biting at it, clawing at it, and it's roaring at him, and then the T-Rex gets back up and bites it around the neck and starts shaking it around, driving it into buildings. The Claire, Zach, Gray, Owen, they are managing to avoid getting hit by anything, but they're having to run around to avoid all this glass, all this metal. Blue keeps jumping back and forth from the Indominus to the T-Rex to get a good hold on it and starts clawing at its face. And the T-Rex headbutts it into these metal bars, and it's right next to the water. And it gives one more roar, all bloodied up, with building pieces sticking out of it. And then the Mosasaurus comes out, grabs the Indominus by the neck, and pulls it into the water. And that's the end of the Indominus Rex. And we end the movie at a emergency warehouse, I guess you would call it, where every person who's been injured and all the people who are looking for each other are all together, including Claire, Zach, Gray, Owen, and Claire's sister arrives, and they just have a huge hug. And then she gets with Owen. She says, "What are we going to do now?" I don't think he answers. And of course, at the beginning of the movie, we got the beautiful, beautiful Jurassic Park opening. Now, I know this was a bit of a strange review how I did it, but I will give this film a rating. Compared to the other two films that immediately followed Jurassic Park, this was by far much better. Much, much better. I would give it a solid A-, except for a couple of things. The biggest thing being how the quote-unquote bad people died. For example, the babysitter, Zara. That she was completely unattended to the kids. She was a bridezilla. She was stuck up, all these different things. She was hysterical. Like, come on. Come on. Why is it that when we see that kind of a character trait, that person has to die? It was like a completely unnecessary death. It was only for the movie. That was all it was. Other than her being a bit of a dramatic person, she didn't deserve that. Come on. And Hoskins. His death. Yes, he was the quote-unquote villain, but you could obviously see his point of view. It was a very cynical one, I'll give you that. But he wasn't an evil dude. He really did want to save people's lives. Obviously, he was going about certain things in an unethical way, but he wasn't an evil dude. He just wasn't. I mean, when he talked about his wolf that he had an unshakable bond with, even though it took a chunk out of his wife's arm, and he talked about how his wife came at him with a steak knife, it's like, okay, this guy's got more depth than that, and we don't get to see any more? He just gets eaten by the raptor because he wants to do a field test, and Owen doesn't agree with him? Now, obviously, I'm a more cynical person, so seeing how he discussed things, yes, he lacks certain self-awareness, but that doesn't mean he's a bad dude. He was doing certain bad things, but he wasn't evil. He wasn't. And then for him to go out because the dinosaurs ate him, the dinosaurs he was training to be weapons. I get it. It's supposed to be ironically satisfying. I found it just complete BS. That's my biggest thing with this movie. That's the one thing I wish they had changed. That they hadn't killed those people the way they did. Like, let Hoskins escape or something. And let him do something else. Or let him maybe get injured and he has a change of heart. Something. But just bad guys or dramatic people that deserve something? No. Basically, let me give you an example. From the original movie, from Jurassic Park, we had Donald Gennaro, who was the kind of dramatic guy who we assumed got what he had coming to him because all he saw was money, but when he got really scared, he abandoned everything and got eaten by the dinosaur. Okay, I can see where we're coming from, but then we also had the bad guy of Dennis Nedry, who we assume, yeah, he's just a bad guy, but I think it was more that he was a selfish guy. He didn't want anybody to die, but he was selfish. He was willing to steal research because he didn't feel he was getting paid enough. You at least see where he's coming from. And him to be eaten by the Dilophosaurus the way he was, it was more that he underestimated everything he was facing. You look at Hoskins, and he's supposed to be the bad dude, like Dennis Nedry, that all he sees are dollar signs and that he's not getting paid enough. No, he really does want to do something good. the way he goes about it, we disagree with, and we disagree with it because Owen Grady disagrees with it. He's the good guy. He's the hero. But in reality, he just takes a more cynical, worldwide view. So again, my biggest issue with the film was those two deaths. Everything else, I'm like, kind of expected. Oh, that was surprising. Oh, wow, the Raptors turned. Could have seen that, but didn't see it at the time. And then seeing the fight, the big battle, that was really good. That was really good. Especially how they managed to get the T-Rex in. And there was one more small part that really bugged me. It was a small thing, but when Claire brings in the T-Rex and then she's lying on the floor behind it, and we see one of its feet, and it reminded me of King Kong, and I'm like, really? They didn't have to include that. It's like, oh, the T-Rex is defending her like Kong would. Like, no, not for me. Whew, sorry, but my apologies for going on my rant. But that's how I feel. I give this movie a solid A- otherwise. Those are minor things that overall the movie was really good. It was a good reboot, a good sequel. And I hope you enjoyed this, or at least could follow it. So next time I'm hoping to do Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and that will be my next movie review. So thank you for listening, and take care.